So the finale of the Loki series came out recently, and I've been thinking about it ever since. Not because of the huge implications it will have on the MCU going forward, or because of the amazing production of the show itself, but because of how far Loki has come as a character. And it's made me realise that Loki might just be the best character in the MCU. In this episode of Cinemaze, we'll be looking into why Loki is so great, but before we dive in, if you haven't seen the Loki series yet, this will contain spoilers, so I highly recommend watching it before this video. Now, let's go back to this scene. Masterfully played by the brilliant Tom Hiddleston, it's this 43-second take that sums up Loki's arc so far. We get a slow zoom onto his face, paired with Natalie Holt's heartfelt score. Loki doesn't say anything. All we see is Hiddleston showcasing the strong range of emotion felt by the character, which reflects the cascading journey he has endured to where he is right now in the TVA. Loneliness, despair, self-reflection, and ambition. Why is he feeling like this? The answer is he finally knows who he is and accepts his real identity. When we are first introduced to the God of Mischief, we see this conflict cemented into his identity right from the beginning. He was born as a frost giant of Jotunheim to the King Laufey, but adopted and raised by the Asgardian Allfather Odin, alongside his brother Thor and mother Frigga. In Nordic mythology, Loki is portrayed as a scheming coward who cares only for shallow pleasures and self-preservation, often with a nihilistic view on his glorious purpose within the universe. In the original comics written by Jack Kirby, Loki was rejected by Laufey as he was smaller than the rest of his race and segregated as an embarrassment to his biological parents. Before knowing his true origin, Loki still feels like an outcast, not feeling a sense of belonging or purpose within Asgard. Loki is forced to live in the shadow of his favoured brother and compete for the destiny of being king.
Only one of you can ascend to the throne, and both of you were born to be kings.
We can see here that deep down, Loki merely wants to be accepted by someone.
Tell me!
And ironically, the person he believes will give him the greatest meaning and purpose is his father, Odin. But he's the one who originally bound Loki to a life away from the frost giant throne he was born to sit in.
I thought we could unite our kingdoms one day, bring about an alliance, bring about permanent peace through you.
This revelation is a turning point for Loki, as he is further cast out both within the society and family he finds himself, and further cast out from himself. After abandoning himself to evil and rage,
why have you done this?
To prove to Father that I am a worthy son.
He still reaches out for Odin and Thor's approval.
I could have done it, Father! For you!
No, Loki.
The king of Asgard's refusal to accept Loki, causing his son to cast himself into the abyss of the universe, both physically and metaphorically. This reveals a big difference between Loki and some of the other big characters in the MCU. Some like Captain Rogers, Iron Man and Black Panther already understand their identities and purposes, while others find it later like Ant-Man, Captain Marvel and Black Widow. It is Loki, however, that remains in this state of self-confusion. In the Avengers, we find Loki lost within himself. His sense of purpose fixates on seeking power over Thor's Earth with the help of Thanos and the Chitauri. Even despite Thor's plea to come back home to Asgard, Loki is blinded by this false ambition and pursuit of belonging, saying he'll prove himself as Odin's son and that it's too late.
It's too late.
Highlighting Loki's nihilistic view of the universe that has always meant for him to lose. Instead, he seeks to compensate this war within himself with a war on Earth, deeply convinced that there is no one who truly loves him. Here he becomes desperate, and his hurt pride prevents him from reflecting upon his actions, with no one to challenge him.
I'll have that drink now.
Next, in Thor the Dark World, after being captured for his actions and jailed back on Asgard, we are reminded of one of the few people who hasn't given up on Loki, his adopted mother Frigga.
Frigga is the only reason you're still alive, and you will never see her again. You'll spend the rest of your days in the dungeon.
Frigga seemed to be the only one still believing in him, still seeing the good in him. She never made a difference between her sons, sharing her powers with Loki and making him feel like someone special, someone valuable, and someone worth loving. Enthralled with his rage,
not my father!
Then am I not your mother?
You're not.
He rejects her pleas, but still tries to reach out for her, only for it to be a hologram.
Always so perceptive about everyone but yourself.
Here we finally get a glimpse behind the mask and hologram that Loki wears, with Loki's true sadness and despair coming to the surface when he hears of Frigga's death. Loki has been literally and metaphorically concealing his true images of himself and his search for belonging within his family. This allows him to reset and build a new identity, once realizing he is the author of his own story and not the son of anyone but himself. We see in Ragnarok, Loki has begun to recover from his trauma and begins to accept himself, even going so far as indulging in his own self-image while disguising as Odin. This stage performance reflects new dreams and motivations for Loki's identity.
On that day, I did not yet see in you Asgard's savior. No, you were merely a little blue baby icicle that melted this old fool's heart.
In spite of all his actions, we see Odin purposely calls both Loki and Thor
My sons.
reaching out to the lost Loki, who previously was blinded by his self-inadequacy to accept what he always wanted. And Odin later says again,
I love you, my sons.
these are words Loki has been longing to hear his entire life, and we see that it means so much to him. And after receiving that, the death of his father symbolically shows the end of Loki's attachment for Odin's acceptance. Later in the film, Thor reaches out and believes there's potentially still good in Loki, highlighting the brotherly love and faith that Thor has always had for Loki at his core.
Loki, I thought the world of you. And now maybe there's still good in you, but let's be honest, that path's diverged a long time ago.
This reassurance spurs Loki on to become the hero of Asgard he sought to be.
Your savior is here!
Finally feeling the acceptance of his people and of himself after defeating Hela.
Oh, maybe you're not so bad after all, brother.
Maybe not.
If you're here, I might even give you a hug.
I'm here.
Following this, we arrive at Infinity War with a Loki who finally understands his own identity and purpose, not as an outcast but as
Odin's son.
With some of his final words, he says,
I assure you, brother, the sun will shine on us again.
Here he chooses the life of his own brother over that of the Tesseract, marking a huge change in his motivations and love for his only remaining family. Coloured with typical Loki trickery, the act of sacrificing himself to his former master Thanos and giving up the Tesseract in order to save Thor illustrates Loki's overcoming of his darkness, the demons that plagued him quite literally exchanged for the light of the love given to him by his adoptive family. By choosing the life of his brother, Loki embraces his own death in favour of what always mattered to him, love and belonging. In the Loki series, we jump back to the Loki we saw after the Avengers, having used the Tesseract to escape only to be caught by the TVA due to his straying away from the sacred timeline. We're back to the Loki consumed by rage and desperate for belonging. In the first episode of the series, Loki is physically and metaphorically stripped of the powers and the surface he used to mask himself by the TVA, with even the lights in the waiting room reflecting a sea of eyes on Loki trying to expose his identity. Loki says,
You want to be king? I don't want to be. I was born to be.
and he wants to,
Finish what I started, which is claim my throne.
more importantly, he states with conviction,
I know what I am. A murderer, a liberator.
and having seen from his previous path in the Infinity Saga, we know this to be a lie that Loki continues to tell himself. Being blinded by the pursuit of what he is owed, Loki has never been challenged to reflect upon himself until he meets Mobius, played perfectly by the iconic Owen Wilson. Mobius tells Loki,
I want you to be honest about why you do what you do. What makes Loki tick?
and at this stage, even Loki doesn't know the answer to that yet, still battling within himself. He's then exposed to the horrific actions he commits in the future and still tries to justify himself before realizing that this is not what he wants upon seeing Frigga's tragic death.
I love you, my sons. Remember this place.
Oh, maybe you're you're not so bad after all, brother.
Maybe not. Thank you.
It's here that after seeing the loss of everyone important in his life, as well as his own eventual death by Thanos, that Loki realizes his past faults and reflects on who he is. We also see the lack of meaning that comes from seeking power through the Infinity Stones, being compared to mere paperweights in the TVA.
Some of the guys use them as paperweights.
Lady Sif furthers this repeatedly by telling Loki,
I hope you know you deserve to be alone and you always will be.
After he cut off her hair, which in the comics was because he realized she will never be his, casting Loki back out within himself and forced to confront his existence and purpose. Finally, Loki submits to the mask he wears, admitting to Sif who he is.
I'm a horrible person. I get it. I really am. It's because I'm scared of being alone.
You are alone. And you always will be.
The arrival of Sylvie, another alternate version of Loki, compounds the challenge for Loki to see beyond himself and immediately puts his behavior into perspective, saying,
This isn't about you.
This triggers Loki to self-reflect on his place in the world, where after spoiling Sylvie's lifelong pursuits on Lamentus 1, he realizes,
We may lose, sometimes painfully, but we don't die. We survive.
highlighting his relentless ambition to belong. Here they share a moment where they both finally belong to one another, only to be forced into a fight with the secret timekeepers. This tragically ends in Loki being pruned from existence and literally coming in contact with other versions of who he could be, the most impactful being that of old Loki, played by Richard E. Grant. With an amazing performance from Grant, it's here that Old Man Loki shares the tale of how instead of seeking belonging with his brother Thor and saving him from Thanos, he instead selfishly chooses his own survival, casting a projection of himself as mere debris, reflecting the lack of meaning he would later feel as an inanimate object drifting in space.
I cast a projection of myself so real, even the mad Titan believed it, then hid as inanimate debris. After I faked my death, I simply drifted in space, away from Thor, away from everything. I thought about the universe and my place in it, and it occurred to me that everywhere I went, only pain followed. So I removed myself from the equation, landed on a remote planet and stayed there in isolation, in solitude, for a long, long time.
And Old Man Loki furthers this by saying,
I got lonely. To tell you the truth, I missed my brother, and I wondered if he missed me, if anybody else did. But as soon as I took my first steps to getting off the planet, the TVA arrived. Because we, my friends, have but one part to play. The God of Outcasts. Nothing more.
And our Loki rejects this, in search for more, only to be faced by even more variations of what he could be.
Hello. Which one of us are you?
Reuniting with Sylvie, Loki's loneliness gets put in perspective, with Sylvie having no one, and they belong with each other.
I don't have anyone.
Loki again realizes his past mistakes, saying,
I betrayed everyone who ever loved me. I betrayed my father, my brother, my home. I know what I did, and I know why I did it. And that's not who I am anymore.
Later, faced against Goliath, old Loki is given a second chance to redeem his mistakes, and he chooses to sacrifice himself, using his final strength and shouting the realization that this was always his. By being able to see a future version of himself find solace and catharsis in finding his true place in the universe, Loki is enabled to edge closer to finding his identity. Finally, with Kang, we are reminded that you
can't get to the end until you've been changed by the journey. This stuff, it needs to happen.
Highlighting that these experiences for Loki had to happen in order for him to realize who he really is and where he belongs. After a brief confrontation with Sylvie, we see this revelation in Loki's emotional plea and admission that after all this,
all I know
is I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to throne. I just want you to be okay.
They share a touching yet incestual kiss that ultimately symbolizes Loki's final acceptance of himself and his place in the universe. Now, with the multiverse thrust into chaos with the ever-branching timelines, we finally arrive back to where we began. Tom Hiddleston's touching performance bringing Loki's entire character arc into one perfect scene. At the end, we see a renewed Loki that finally understands his purpose as a hero. And who knows where he'll go next, but it's this journey through loneliness, despair, and self-reflection that has led him here to the ambitious Loki. Director Kate Herron, who also directed part of Netflix's critically and commercially successful series Sex Education, puts it perfectly saying that Loki is about self-acceptance, where Tom Hiddleston furthers this, noting this is a character who doesn't know how to change and grow. It's about coming to terms with who you are.
And she said, I think it's about self-acceptance. You've got a character who doesn't know how to change and grow. And we have this amazing story that's actually about coming to terms with who you are.
Through 2 hours of screen time, over 10 years and 6 films, Loki's inner turmoil with himself comes to a climax, and he has found his identity and glorious purpose. And this is why Loki is the best character in the MCU. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. This has been the first episode of Cinemaze. So if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, throw me a like, and let me know what you think down in the comments. Also, I can't wait to do more videos, so please let me know which characters you'd like me to do next.